All right, welcome back to another Ladder Legends replay review. Today we're going to be looking at Mike, aka Goober Jelly, and I did go ahead and pre-watch this game as normal, and I'm going to kind of speed through to the most important pieces. Um, right off the bat, I think that it's important to note that this is definitely a lower level game. The builds from both players are looking a little bit unrefined, and so it could be tempting to focus on the fact that like not seeing like an extra base early on, we might need to have a very specific response as we go up in MMR. But at this point, if we kind of just let the tape play, we'll see that it doesn't really matter all that much that we don't actually know that they're on two bases. Like we don't, there's big windows for us to get punished, but we don't really get punished. And so what actually happens is we get to a pretty fine situation, and here's the first time when we kind of noticed that, like, hey, maybe this game is a little bit different than it should be, because we would be expecting to see a base here normally. So at this point, what we want to start doing is we already have a Roachborn about done. At this point, we really want to be maybe hitting one creep tumor just so we can start creeping. But other than that, we want to be focusing on figuring out what our opponent is doing, because we don't want to have anything like weird, like one base BC or Banshee, like cooking up. But if it's anything, so from there, basically anything one base, we're going to want to be pushing out queens, mass queens as much as possible, and then lings. And then since we have the roach horn already on the way, we could actually then consider start making roaches as soon as the roach horn was finished. If the roach horn wasn't on the way, then we could continue with mass queen ling would probably be good, and then dropping a bay nest at some point as well. But at this point, you know, really, it would have been nicer if we would have known that he didn't have a base sooner. But if we kind of look at the situation, it's completely fine for us to just continue pumping, start pumping queens at this point, and lings until we see him giving us an indication that he plans on playing it in macro game. So there are all situations where we can get hemmed up if he starts to hit super tight timings with like battle cruisers in one base. That we could leave ourselves potentially open to, but until that becomes a problem, let's not consider this too much more and move on. So we get through the game here. We see a huge force here. And this is where it's pretty nice sometimes to have the lings, instead of having all your lings out here, have like maybe one ling here and the rest of the lings maybe a little bit further back, such that if there is an attack like this, you get notified to the ping on the minimap whenever the first whenever the first unit gets attacked, and that allows you to like go ahead and pay closer attention to your units to make sure you don't lose them all. Because as you see, we lose all but two lings, which is still pretty fine. Really, we're just really concerned about seeing if he has a space. So at this point, even with these two lings, we want to keep one near outside the front and see if we can sneak one around the edges to check out the space time. Because at this point, if with seeing this, we still want to just be massing units and queens because we still don't see a base. Once we finally confirm that this comes down with a ling, then we can start to say, okay, he's just doing some really strange builds. That's completely fine. We're going to keep droning. And at this point, I think it's important to note that like what our goal is we are economically ahead. We've been mining bases a lot sooner than him. We've got our third base up, and he's just starting his natural. What this means is as long as we have vision outside of his base and vision, outside of his like airdrops from his base, we can kind of drone up a little bit freely. We want to make sure that we already have 41 drones. The max drones count, SCV count that he can have, even after this base finishes, is going to be about 44, which tells us that like we're basically at the drone count that we need to be, that like he could never be out mining us. And so if we just go up to another 5 to 10 drones, that's basically going to be all the drones we need until we see him start to make an indication that he wants to make a third base. So if we keep watching this tape, we could just drone up once more to about 50, and then we see that he pushes out. Now that we see him pushing out, we also have these links across maps, so we know that he can't get across map without us seeing him, at least not very easily. So we'd probably would still feel free to be droning up a little bit more. And so this is like the first big mistake here, is that like even though we are still technically, because his base is so late, we're still ahead economically. I would like to see us try to make sure that we get that extra 10 drones out at some point. And then the sooner, once we are sure, as soon as we see this base, we know that he's planning on, utilizing this. That's when we can justify the extra drones. So the sooner we get them, the more that they will give us value. But we get those extra drones and we keep making units. Then we see him actually move out. And at this point, now we want to take a nice big fight and crush him. And we do essentially do that. So once we crush him, this would be a green light. We just crushed an attack to take another base and make another round of drones, maybe going up to 60 drones. And then at that point, we just need to we can continue to push across map. But this is where I think the biggest lesson of this game comes in, which is what is our win conditions. And in StarCraft, one of the win conditions you have is being able to leverage a greater economic advantage to have way more units and way more numbers than him, such that he can never actually recover. You're in an unlosable position at this point. If you just understand that your win condition is not actually going in and dealing a final killing blow against the Terran, but is instead making sure that he can't take this base, he can't take this base or this base, and he can't sneak one of the outer bases. As long as he can't do that, as long as he can't take any of these outer bases as like a sneak base, and he can't take any of his natural thirds, you know that you are going to have access to far more resources. And so this is where instead of what we actually go for is we actually go ahead and try to push in. We finally do actually make those little extra drones, so this is nice. But now we actually try to push into his base here. And there's really no reason. We now have super map control. We know we're doing really good. We can fight him, but we're completely content to let him actually come back in here. And instead what we want to do is we want to start spreading vision here, but we also need vision here, vision up here. And we can do it with changelings, but at this point also we should be very comfortable splitting off a few links to do so as well. So the way that I would recommend doing this is if we know it's the standard hotkey is Control Shift or Alt Shift, or Alt Control. If you do Alt Shift or Alt Control, it will take a unit that's on a current hotkey like 1, and you can Alt Control 4, for instance, and that would create a new hotkey with like these units on 4, and it would also pull them off of the hotkey that they're currently on. So if you do that on a hotkey that you don't intend on actually using, but you just want to use it to pull it off of your current hotkey, that's called a dump hotkey. So if we dump hotkey a Zergling here, a Zergling here, a Zergling here, a Zergling here, and a Zergling here, and our main army is kind of chilling right here, then we know that we can continue to just build up forces here, have our 55, 60 drones mining, maybe take another base, but mostly just continue to build up the forces here, maybe make some amount of Ravagers, some amount of Lingbane. We know that we don't have to fight in here until we're maxed out 200. But until that time, we can just camp and wait for him to try to take another base, and then only when he's compelled to come out to defend his base do we fight him. Once we hit 200, we probably do want to start getting a little bit of a larva bank and then starting to attack, because at that point, we know that out of 200, we start to lose the advantage we have because the Terran will start to catch up in supply. But what we still have a way to actually leverage that advantage is to take a trade, pull back, use our larva to instantly max 200 again. And the Terran, because they're on much lower economy, and also just the way that Terran works, they will not be able to max as quickly as you will. So if you do have to wait long enough to where they just sit in their base turtling on this situation, you would just go to 200. Prepare a huge push, make sure that you had tons of extra larvae, push in, even if it's an inefficient trade, just let your Lings and Banes and in the front dry up, pull back with all of your ranged units, remax on Lings, create some more Banes, go again, and you'd rinse and repeat until the Terran was dead. Unfortunately, what we actually do is we actually try to push in here, which is a little too early, and although it could be fine, if you notice the situation is still good, all we're doing is we've kind of lost all of our huge army, and even though we have completely crippled him economically, that was an advantage we already had. We just made the advantage we already had even bigger, but we gave him a win condition, which is now he has a pretty big army that he can try to use to actually come over and win this game, and that's exactly what he does. He immediately goes for the throat and wins the game. So this is where just if we play to our win condition and play to the boring win condition of, I know that I have a bigger army, I know that you can't actually, as long as you can't get armies out and without me seeing, then I know that I will eventually win this game because I'll just have way more numbers than you. That's the boring win condition that we want to play to. So just getting the vision so that he can't get the armies out, and then taking the fight as soon as he's in open ground, or going to 200 and maxing and remaxing and attacking over and over again. That's the boring, surefire way to win this game and increase your MMR. If you like this content, you'll probably enjoy subscribing to Ladder Legends because Ladder Legends will allow you to submit replays and get reviews like this one. Thanks. Have a great one.